and welcome to another episode of Don't Shit on the Bus. I'm your host, Adam Elmakais, tuning in all the way from Los Angeles, California, for episode number 82 with my new good friend, Kenny. Thank you, Kenny, for joining me today. Kenny came to me through fate, which is great. I love when stuff just happens organically, naturally. I found Kenny while I was doing comp research for my new book based on this podcast. And comp research is when you look up books that are in the same realm, the same world, or have the same principles as the book you're doing as a way to demonstrate that this book is viable. Look at these other markets that were successful. So Kenny has two books. He has a Backstage Pass and Stagehand 101, which immediately got me thinking, darn it, I need more information on these things. He's written books on it. What better person to talk to than Kenny himself? So I went to Kenny's Instagram. I figured out we had a mutual friend by the name of Miranda McDonald who toured with him on Need to Breathe, which is an artist, as a photographer. And Miranda's a good friend of mine. So I hit her up. I said, hey, can you connect me to Kenny? And a week later, we were talking on the podcast and we had one of my most favorite episodes to date, which I probably say all the time, but that doesn't make it any less true. Now, Kenny is a great teacher. He's a great learner, which I think goes hand in hand. Kenny is a very curious person. And because of that, he learns a lot. And because of that, he teaches very well. And I think him and I have a lot of things in common, which is what makes us so obsessed with this industry. There's just so much to learn. But I'll acknowledge that one of the things that I don't think I'm very good at is the things I haven't experienced. And I have not experienced finding the music industry through being a stagehand, which is a very common route to getting on tour. However, my experience was a little different because I was a photographer. I'm not necessarily good with my hands or a tech or anything like that. But a lot of people are, and that's how they find this industry, and that's how Kenny found this industry, and that's the way he teaches to get into this industry. In fact, we'll put all of his links in the caption. He also coaches people to help them achieve this jump that is difficult to do. So thank you, Kenny, for doing that. Thank you for being part of the good cause, and thank you so much for taking time out of your day to teach us a very condensed but very informational hour course on how to go from being a local stagehand to getting on the road. And this is a very way to get on the road. And you will see that through these teachings, but it allows you to get a wide variety of knowledge that then gives you the ability to navigate the industry much more fluidly, understand what your peers are doing and the people you work with. And in addition to that, figure out which area you want to specialize in. And I loved his take on this. So I hope you enjoy this episode of Don't Shit on the Bus. Before we get into the podcast, of course, I would like to welcome our new patrons. And if you signed up in the last 2 months or month or so, I still haven't sent you your welcome gift. It's coming this week because we got a bunch of people. All right. And thank you so much to our new patrons. We have Kiki. What's up? Long time no talk. I've known you for a while on the interwebs. I'm happy to see you here. I hope we can help you out. Karina, welcome to the Patreon. And lastly, Sethan, which is kind of like the name Seth, but with an EN at the end, which is cool. So welcome to Patreon. Thank you so much for your weekly contributions to making this podcast happen. I thank you. Ava thanks you. Connor thanks you. That's our team. We keep it small, but we're efficient. We got this on lock. So I appreciate you guys so much. And I look forward to seeing you next week on Don't Shit on the Bus. All right. Until then. All right. Welcome to the podcast, Kenny. How you doing, man?
Man, I am doing incredible today, actually.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. And I'm excited that we seem to have snagged you, even though your background might say otherwise. You're home.
Yeah, yes, thank you, man. I did just get back from doing 2 weeks in Vegas. Yeah, exactly. Well, to be honest with you, it was the first time I'd ever done a residency in Vegas. I did a residency with Jonas Brothers. It was good to go to the same place every time, but I got to tell you, 2 weeks in Vegas, man, it's like it can drive you crazy. I'm ready to get out of there. So I don't know. I mean, there's something about touring where you can kind of keep the variety and stuff. But I don't know. I didn't mind Vegas so much, but 2 weeks was certainly enough.
Doses. And I mean, a newborn, congratulations. Nothing like that'll make you excited to go home.
Day before yesterday, he's 8 months old, pretty much a newborn, man. 8 months, it's like flown by. And you're right, man. It's like definitely the pull these days to want to go home. But you know, to your listeners, I've toured for almost 20 years.
Oh wow! Congratulations, man. That's a feat in itself, and you're all smiles. and good vibes, which is definitely the goal, to have a healthy touring career and still love it after 20 years, because I'm sure you've come across
Mm.
people who maybe that hasn't been their experience and they've left the industry. And the goal here is to kind of, get people on the road in a good, healthy, balanced way. So,
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, I mean, I was that person. To be honest with you, I left the road because it got unhealthy for me, which I'm sure we can get there in that conversation. But yeah, for sure, it's a unique lifestyle. And it's not for everyone, but as soon as you get a taste of it, you want to be able to have it work for you. And there's ways to do that, man. There's the ways to have longevity. And I feel like 20 years is a long time, but there's people out there that, man, have 30 and 40 years of experience, which is mind blowing.
yeah, that's awesome. Well, good for you for recognizing when maybe it was time to take a step back, fixing it, and obviously you're on the road again, so you found peace there, and you made it work. But I guess we could kind of go back. I'm always interested, and the show today is a little bit guided in a way where we do have you've got a lot of knowledge, and we don't have time for it on this podcast. But I did found one piece or one section that I really want to talk about. But before we get there, I'm very interested actually in how you, before you even found your way onto the road or working in
Mhm.
music, I was wondering how you figured out there was an industry to work in music, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. I mean, it was a pretty interesting way I found the music business, or the music business found me. I actually grew up in rural Georgia. I grew up
Okay.
on a dead end dirt road off another dirt road, and I grew up with deaf parents. My parents can't hear. My
Both of
mom's
them.
actually Yeah, my mom's actually 100% deaf in both of her ears, but my
Oh,
dad's
wow.
more hard of hearing. I mean, to be honest with you, when me and my brothers would get rowdy, I almost sometimes thought it would be like selective hearing, because he could certainly he could certainly feel us get rowdy. But yeah, I grew up with deaf parents, but music kind of found me through my influences, not necessarily my parents' influence. I didn't have it easy at a certain point in my childhood. When I was a teenager, my parents divorced, and I was the last kid left at the house. And
Okay.
they wanted me to choose which parent to go to. And for me,
Oh,
that
great.
just tore me up. And yeah, it just kind of put me in a spiral emotionally. And as a 14, 15-year old, and a couple of years during that time, I started using drugs as a
Yeah.
young teen. And during that time, just kind of took this tumble in making bad choices. And by the time I was 16 years old, I found myself homeless.
Okay.
My parent being divorced parents, and my parents starting new lives, I found myself in the middle, floating around. And literally for almost 2 years of my young teen life, I dropped out of high school and was homeless on the streets, and living in the car that I had, bounced around the couches, things like that. And long story short, it got me connected with someone during that time that had worked in the music industry. She saw that I was lost and looking. And by the time I had met her, I had already started to take a turn to try to like better my life.
Hmm.
And so when I was 18, 19, almost 19, she connected me as a stagehand
Oh,
in
wow.
Atlanta, because someone she knew owned the stagehand company, and was like, well, it's no experience necessary. You can get a job as a stagehand. I'm like, what's a stagehand?
Yeah.
I
Tell
didn't
me
know
about
anything.
this.
Yeah, tell me about this. And she was like, well, you can get paid to kind of like help set up concerts. Like, you don't need any experience or anything like that. You basically, they'll tell you what to do. You just help set up the speakers and the lighting. And I'm like, and they'll pay me to do this? Because at that point,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
as a
Free
young strung
concerts?
out, yeah, as a young strung out teen, I'm like just doing whatever I could do work wise. So I at that point in my life, I'd done a little bit of everything, from
Yeah. Yeah.
restaurants to constructions to anything to make a buck. And so, interesting connection to this was, I even though I grew up with deaf parents, I played music. I played drums, and I
Oh,
actually
awesome.
the my only possession pretty much was my acoustic guitar that I had at the time. And so music was near and dear to me. And when this lady was just like, you could work backstage at concerts, I'm like, this could be amazing.
Probably thought she was messing with you. It sounds like it's like a job. Usually people like, they try to get, and you're like, wait, you just came to me and presented me with this thing. And very cool part
Yeah,
about it is no experience necessary is so key here. Like, that's awesome.
man, I didn't realize how key that component was. Now, don't get me wrong, just because she's her friend knew the owner
Yeah.
of the company, and it was no experience necessary. At the time, Atlanta was busy. And so there was still a list. There was still a list that I was the bottom of. And
Okay.
actually, on top of that, the only thing that I could do at the time was what's called a standby position as a stagehand. A standby position, for those who aren't familiar, is they add like anywhere from 1 to 4 extra stagehands to a call. And they do this because, to be honest with you, a lot of the stagehands aren't the most reliable folk, just being honest. And people often don't show up and they have to fill these calls. And so a standby,
ready to go.
That's right. They gotta fill the calls, because at the end of the day, the stagehand company has a client, and the client needs X amount of labor hands to fulfill the workload, at the bare minimum. And so they always book these standbys for just in case someone doesn't show up, because it happens often. Okay. Which was by the way, was another key component to career growth. I had no idea. I didn't realize that there was not a lot of competition when it came to my fellow stagehand, but that's for another part of the conversation.
I see what the no experience necessary comes with its pros and cons.
Yeah. Well, for me, like I get on, they call me up and like, listen, we have a big show going on at the Georgia Dome in Atlanta. I don't even think it's there anymore. It was the big stadium where the Atlanta Falcons play. And I was a young teenager, and I was still living in my van at this time. So I was like, yes, I want to do it. They're like, it's standby. You don't get paid unless you get on the call to work. I'm like, wow, I don't care, man. Like I'm in, I'm your guy.
Got time.
Yeah. So, I spent all of my money in gas, because at the time I had lived back in my small little town. So it's 45 minutes drive outside of Atlanta. So I spent a bunch of money in gas, not a ton at the time. I think gas was still 89 cents a gallon back then.
Sounds great right about now.
Yeah, I know. Right. So I spend, like $8 to park at a parking deck next to the Georgia Dome. I go and I check in with the lead, the project coordinator, and I see all the stagehands starting to assemble and everything. You show up 30 minutes before your call. Okay. You got your call time and your start time. I show up at the call time. I check in, and I'm not the only standby on the call. There was like a couple other standbys. I'm like, okay. I see how this is going. And I could see inside the Georgia Dome. I could the dock door was open, and all these trucks were assembling, crew was assembling. There was some lighting trusses being pushed around. I'm like, dude, this looks awesome. Yeah. Like how cool is this going to be? And so by the time, the last bit of hands show up, steward's like, sorry, Kenny, not this time. We're all full. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, thank you so much. I was like, I was enthusiastic because I could clearly see the potential. And so as I was driving back to my little town, I get a call on the cell phone that I had, which was pay by the minutes. And I actually got booked on the next day as a standby. Again, they needed a standby for the same call. It was a big, huge Christian festival called TD Jakes that was being loaded in all week, Standby, go down there, pay to park, all the money I got, check in. I wait. Sorry, Kenny, we can't use you. So this goes on for the whole week.
They owe you $16.
Well, every day, right? Or $8 a day, And so I get down there. Finally, after about the 10th time, I'm like, I don't think I can make this work. I tell the lady that I was doing some work, odded jobs for. I'm like, I don't think I can make this work. Like I need to get something stable. A friend of mine had called me and said, Kenny, we do framing, house framing. We need a guy, a day laborer. It could be full time for you, 125 a day, like being a cut man and all that. I'm like, man, it's a stable job. I want to do this, but I just can't keep like going downtown and not getting on the calls. I can't even afford to, And so I was like, at this point, the whole dream started to kind of go, well, now it becomes a job. Like now I need money. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I said yes to my friend with the construction job. I said, okay, I'll do it. He's going to pick me up in the morning. That was the thing. He's like, pick me up, take me to work, drop me off, like ideal, rural job. And so that afternoon, the stagehand company calls me. Kenny,
we've been through this.
We slowed out for TD Jakes. Like, we need another standby. We understand, like, we appreciate you for showing up so many times, whatever, but this is what we have available. There was a lot of people on the list in Atlanta, and I wasn't on it yet. Even though I knew the owner of the company, it just didn't work like that. There was seniority and different things. And so finally I drove down there. I said yes to the gig. I called my friend up. I said, listen, I got to go take this. Yeah. Like I want the secure job, but I got to go see. There's like this pull. Once when you see that someone's doing it and you see the knuckleheads that are showing up to get the gig, and you're like, I can do this, you know? And so, man, I check in and everyone starts showing up to the thing. Well, this time I was the first standby on the call. And by this point,
Got
I
him.
know the name of the production coordinator. Like, we know each other at this point. He's like, Kenny, I can't believe you're showing back up. And I'm just like, I'm here, man. Like, I want to do this, you know? But on the inside, to be honest with you, man, I was ready to give up.
Yeah.
And so finally, everyone shows up to the call, and I just remember the guy getting excited for me, saying, "Kenny Barnwell, you know, you're on the
Mm.
call." I'm like, "Yes," you know, and he's just like, "Kenny, I'm going to put you on lighting, but I just want to let you know, like, lighting's hard, heavy work, man. Are you ready for this?" I was like, "You have no idea how ready for
Yeah.
this I am." Like, I'm thinking in my head, dude, I slept in my car
They're
last
getting
night.
you riled up the
Like,
whole week.
man, like 2 weeks, you know, it
Yeah.
was basically the 12th time this happened.
Oh my God.
Even longer short, I do want to tell this point is I was working that day and the stagehand company called me at the break and said, "Kenny, we just want to thank you. To be honest with you, we haven't even seen anybody take this many standbys, but we really needed you as a standby." There was a lot of no shows, and the TD Jakes conference was a big client for them. And they
Yeah.
just want to say, "You're never going to stand by again. We wanted to
Oh, that's
let you know."
awesome.
And they booked me the very next day at Phillips Arena on the Dixie Chicks show. And this was 2002, man.
You know what I love about that is that and I feel like it's, congratulations. First of all, that's awesome. I mean, I'm sure you've heard it time and time again, but what's so cool is that like that concept of just working your ass off and putting in the work is so recognized by people in the music industry. And that point, you know, from day one for you is really hammered home. And I'm glad that story worked out the way it did, and not like the 13th and the 4th, you know what I mean? And it's due to your hard work.
Yeah, well, and that's another thing too, is I run into now is there's this big misconception about working for free and working for exposure. And the people that are very loud about that demonize working for free or exposure, they're
Yeah.
ones that probably should not be working for free and exposure. Because in my mind, it's never for free. If I would have said that back then and was like, well, I can't be a free standby. I can't just come down here for the exposure hoping. It was like, yeah, but my dream is to do this. I can't not afford to do it. Yes, at some point I got to say no to certain gigs like
Big
that.
Big picture,
Big
right?
picture stuff. But don't demonize free and exposure because it's not good for you where you're at.
Yeah, there's a lot of different situations. That's a really good point. I'm happy you said that. I love that you really articulated that well. And I haven't quite found the words for it. But when I hear it, I'm like, well, maybe your experience is a little bit different than other people in this industry. But, you know, start somewhere.
That's right. If you feel like it's free for you, then you shouldn't do it. That means there's no value. But for me, I never thought about the paycheck and the money and the monetary. I negotiated eventually. But what I always focus on, even today, is growth and does it fit where I want to be in life? Yeah. And back then, as hard as it was to get turned down and to only take free stuff, that was where I wanted to be in life. And so I was willing to go through that hard, you know, of spending all that money and paying for parking and being having perseverance and stuff. I didn't look at it like that. I was just making choices based on potential and possibility.
Yeah, it's like an investment of your time. I know up front in the short term, if you stopped after a week, then you would have worked for free. But you're not stopping after a week. You're just getting warmed up. So it's not it's just getting started.
Yeah, that's it. But if you're sour about working for exposure or free time, say no to those things. But don't demonize somebody else's opportunity because you think it's not right for you. That's one of the big principles I'm really trying to push these days, because I feel like people want so bad next level, but they want next level if it fits within the confines of the comforts and the expectations.
And you don't get to make those rules. You kind of gotta, that's fair. That's fair. I like that.
Go to growth, you know?
Oh man. So something that I didn't know, and I think I'm okay with saying this, but I'm a photographer on the road. So my experience is very unique and there's some things I'm not aware of, but I wanted to ask, is it normal or standard that the stagehand companies they're not run by the venue. They're run by a separate company and the venue hires them on. Is that how it works across the board?
No, how it works across the board is different everywhere. Sometimes stagehand unions have the contract for the venue.
Okay, like in New York.
Like in New York and Chicago. And there's a lot of states that are not right to work, meaning, they're forced union contracts.
Okay.
Sometimes the state is, but then there's unions that have the contract for the building, and sometimes they don't, where the promoter can bring in non-union. Sometimes it's up to the promoter. Sometimes the literal promoter themselves, when they rent a venue, sometimes they may be forced into a union labor when they use that venue. And sometimes they can hire out third-party stagehand vendors and stagehand companies. Sometimes the promoter themselves, if they're large enough, like say Live Nation, can hire stagehands themselves even as a promoter. So the stagehand themselves comes from a variety of different sources.
Okay. Noted. And I obviously that could have probably slotted in later, but I had to get it. I wrote it down. I was like, I got to ask him this question. I got to know the answer. I need to know these things.
Yeah, it's good to know in this sequence, because if your listeners are interested in where this is going, I just think it's probably important for them to realize that it's not just one place to go find your entry level opportunity of staging.
Yes. No, agreed. No, that's perfect. Okay. A little bit more on your story, and then we're going to get, if you guys are still wondering what a stagehand is, don't worry. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into the specifics, but I want to know, and I know there's probably a lot that happened in between this. I don't know if we have enough time to go for it, but I want to know, you worked as a stagehand. By the way, that venue was demolished in 2017. I looked it up.
Oh, the Georgia Dome. Wow.
Yeah. The 70,000 cap venue. I would have been addicted too if I went in and saw that. I looked it up. Cool. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Anyway, you're stagehand, you're working. When did you, and maybe this is the same thing, like when did you first realize you could tour? And then furthermore, when did you get on tour? Like, I want to know about that transition, because that's kind of like the next level, I think.
I let's just say I made it happen really quite quickly. Within a year and a half, I was on my first tour. So a year and a half as a stagehand, I was on my first tour.
Love to hear that.
Yeah. I mean, it happened really quickly for me, because the reason why was because I always made growth choices with work.
Okay.
I never worried about how many hours, if there were breaks, if we were getting a free t-shirt. I never worried about how much it paid. As long as there was some pay, at some point you don't do the standbys anymore and stuff. So it was growth. It's growth. That's all I mean. So what ended up happening was, anytime there was an opportunity to do the hard parts of the gig, I was the first person to raise my hand always. So I would show up. Hey, who wants to run feeder in this muddy festival? Miles of it. Kenny will do it.
Yeah.
Who wants to load trucks? Kenny will do it. Who wants to be a pusher? I'll do it. I never cared.
Yeah.
Now, I had a preference eventually, because I would love to close the learning gap. But what ends up happening was, you being the reliable person gets put where they need you, but they also come to you and say, hey, what you're showing interest in? Would you like to be put on some more of that stuff? And when you're the reliable person and willing to do whatever consistently and reliably, then you're going to get called for the small gigs. And that's what ended up happening for me, is I got called for the small stuff, like where, a staging company that has a list of 200 something people, they get a high-end corporate client at a local Atlanta hotel, and they only need 2 stagehands. Well, they put Kenny on it because he's consistent, he's presentable, he speaks well, he always comes through, he does his thing. And so let's put Kenny on it.
That's great.
Yeah. And so what it did for me was it sharpened my sword really freaking fast. I got offered, I learned how to drive a forklift real quick, a scissor lift, a boom lift really quick. I got offered to climb. That was back in the day where you would climb the truss and hand focus, manually focus spots or lighting. I was always saying yes to it. Dude, anytime, like I asked for things too. Like I said, can I shadow? Can I stay, since I didn't get show call? Can I stay and shadow the spotlight operator for show call? And so because I was cool and I wasn't ever bugging, they said, sure. So I stayed on my own time.
Yeah.
Right. I stayed in downtown Atlanta. Maybe I had to take a nap in the car, because I didn't want to move my car. And then I would stay and do I would sit behind the spotlight operator and learn. And then I would ask, hey, can I fumble with some stuff? I was constantly closing the skills gap, which means, the more I understood and the more I could speak the language, talk the language, be more reliable, I was getting next level opportunities. Like I would get on a corporate call, and then the lighting tech that was leading it was like a local regional Atlanta company. They, by that point, because you're the same stagehand on a bunch of their different gigs, they are even knowing you. So your clients are knowing you.
Your network is growing, and Yeah.
It's growing. So then they hand you the lighting plot and say, hey, can you hang these lights for me? And so the more that they trust in you, they give you more of these tech level responsibilities, which grows you really, really quickly beyond just being a stagehand. Then the stagehand company also hired techs, operators for small stuff. And so I started getting these opportunities of growing my responsibility. But remember, I was always a musician. And so it was always the music that brought me. And so it was concerts that I loved doing more than the corporate stuff or any of that stuff. I was good for it. I was always willing to put on a collared shirt and go do the corporate things, but it was always the music. In this industry, when you go to tour, this is something really critical that everyone should know is tours don't hire generalists. Tours don't just hire general capable people. Tours hire specialists. Tours hire specific roles. They hire backline techs. Even within backline, they might hire drum techs, guitar techs specific. They don't just hire, oh, we need an audio person. No, they hire a front of house engineer. They hire a monitor engineer. They hire a systems technician. Lighting, they hire dimmer techs. Like there's all these specifics. And so I knew that I had to make a choice. I did want to tour. I wanted to travel, but I had to make a choice. I had to choose. Out of all this experience I was getting, I was learning everything up until really learning the desk, like lighting, everything up until the console.
And in a way, you're saying that tours hire specialists, which
yes,
makes sense because the stagehand is kind of the generalist.
You're a general helper.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. That's right. And even for somebody that's working at a regional company saying, yeah, well, I'm a specialist. I mean, for my company, I set up the audio, I set up the lighting, I set up all the risers. But that's still too general to a tour resume, know? And so I didn't 100% know at this time as a stagehand, I'm like a year in and I didn't 100% know that backline was my thing, but I knew that every time I got to work in backline and stuff, or anytime somebody asked or the steward asked who wants to work with backline, I was in because I was like, man, the instruments, getting to work on stage, getting to do the shifting on and off the deck, being a deck hand, that's cool to me. Which, by the way, awesome. for your listeners, just to catch them up, if they weren't sure by now what a stagehand is, you're basically a skilled laborer that's laboring specifically to help technicians for events. They call it neck down labor, okay. The good stagehand would be neck down labor, just being an extension of these different techs and stuff like that. But however, there is a line to where you can be helpful, but smartly helpful, and that's where I was at. And so I remember because of my reputation, it was about a year in, there was this gig down at the arena and they were looking for one stagehand to work down there with the backline guy because it was rental backline gear.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a backline.
I'm excited.
Yeah, I was like, okay, cool. Well, they called me out of the whole list again. I'm only a year in. Now I will say a few months before this, by the way, I was really layering up, not just with this one stagehand company, but I found out that as long as you could juggle the schedule, you can work with multiple companies. So during this time, I started to layer on other stagehand companies that I had met other stagehands that I was working with. So I was filling up my schedule, sometimes doing 2 and 3 gigs in a day. Jesus. Because that's what you want to do. I remember one year I was so busy, my second year as a stagehand, that I ended up making over 50 grand as a stagehand. And we're talking my low minimum was $10.50 an hour on up.
Yeah. 50 grand back then's more money than 50 grand is now too.
That's right. But in the scheme of being a stagehand, to pull in 50 grand is not too shabby, because we're talking neck down labor, right? I'm just a laborer. Nothing against stagehands' responsibility and stuff, but that is the fact of the matter. In order for me, if I wanted to make more and work less, I would have to get more responsibility.
Yeah.
That's just the way value works and the way the pay works. And stagehand would never do that for me. But a few months before that, some of my friends, when I was layering on companies, they were like, well, come work for the stagehand union in Atlanta. They were like, dude, it's $3 extra an hour every call. And I was just like, I thought about it and I was just like, yeah, but they're not going to let me run a forklift. They're not going to let me do all of these things that I have already been doing. I was going to have to wait years before I was going to be credible enough to get to do things like plug stuff in. Like that's just the way the union limitations work with many of them. And I didn't want to be boxed in because at the time I was growing and I had no idea that this huge world was ahead of me, but I was just taking things. And if I would have went into that union box, there'd be no reason or no way I would be where I'm at today.
Non-growth route, you probably would articulate it as, right? Or less growth rather.
Yeah, more restriction to growth.
Yeah.
And when you restrict growth, you could start to resent the industry, the work. You could start resent yourself, your employer. There's all these things when you put something in the way of growth, because if you're not growing, you're dying, and you will have the symptoms of such. And I meet people like this in my coaching program where they've been dying at work because they're not making growth decisions. They're making, decisions that restrict growth, much like the union does for you when you're trying to grow. Not always, though. I don't want to just say the union. And I want to also preface this, by the way, is I'm not anti-union. I'm pro-growth. If the union is the growth machine for you, then who am I to say? But to anybody that's trying to get on tour, that's trying to rapidly grow, it's not a really smart choice to get yourself involved in. So long story short, Adam, I wanted to say that how I got into backline and got on tour specifically because it's important was through my reputation. I got put on this call that required one backline hand. By the way, would have never happened in the union. A year with the union is not even long enough to have diapers on you to them. I'm kidding. But I put on this call. I'm working with this guy and he's cool. I'm cool. We're doing backline, and he's working with a backline rental company in Atlanta called Avatar Events Group. And I was like, oh, this company's out of Atlanta because it says it on the cases and stuff. And he's like, yeah, this is, Avatar or whatever. And I was like, oh man, that'd be so cool to get to actually do backline for a living. Gosh, I mean, I've been doing, stagehand work now for a year or so, and I've done a bunch of stuff like lighting and audio, but like I love backline, man. I play music myself. And by the end of the day, the conversation, I never asked him for a gig or anything like that. I just said, man, it would be really cool to do what you do. And I asked him about himself. People love to talk about themselves. And so he basically just opened the door wide open and said, well, listen, man, I got to tell you, this company here hires all the time and they might be looking for someone now. There's a lot of stuff going on. I could introduce you to the owner. In fact, here's what you could do. I have a guitar amp that I can't fit in the truck at the end of this gig. If tomorrow you'd be willing to take it down to the Avatar shop in downtown Atlanta, load it up in your car tonight, bring it to the shop tomorrow, then I'll tell the owner you're coming and you can introduce him by helping him out like this. So he doesn't have to send a whole truck.
Yeah. And I just want to stop real fast before we go forward and say, I know we didn't really gloss over it, but it's really important here that like a key part of this is that you were with this person all day. They vibed you and they kind of vibe checked you and they're like, all right, he's cool. I can recommend him within one day. If you weren't that person, this opportunity wouldn't have presented itself.
Well, you make a great point, man. I became him over the course of that year. I became the guy that was able to be cool, to get accepted into that one stagehand for the backline tech position. I was able to speak the language, to understand the chain of command, who I was to him and where I was in the bigger things. And without being pushy, which some stagehands are, they try to look for a handout. You're right, man. I was able to for him to validify me pretty quickly. But it is a relationship game, man. It is. And to this point, here is something that I always say, and I was going to say this later, but this is important. This industry is not a who you know business. It's a who knows you business. And go ahead. Yeah, that's good.
I was just going to say, I should just send you, like, I always say, I'm like, networking. It's not about who you know. It's about who knows you. And it's like in my book already. I just got to send it to you, man.
Yes,
I wish I was lying. I wish I was like faking that, but that's so cool that we've come to this similar. It just makes me excited. I like talking to you.
Man. That's because cool. It's true. You get it, man. That's because that is the truth. And that's proof right there. Like, sure, I would have met him and then he knew me. We networked, right? Like I was in his network as soon as I met him, really. But it's a who knows you thing. By the end of the day, by the end of the conversation, he knew me. He knew me enough to offer me that opportunity. And every single opportunity I've ever gotten, and your listeners will ever get, is going to be based upon who knows them.
I just want to ask quickly, like, I know we said, maybe asking for favors is a wrong thing to do, but people in this situation, people that find themselves maybe not even as a stagehand, but they're talking to a person that could potentially employ them. And that. And often
Yeah.
I find people in the photography world, they start asking for photo passes or they ask for these
Mhm.
things. I'm like, just ask them for coffee. What are the
Yeah.
missteps you think people do take most often that find themselves in that, that very unique and special situation? What are the wrong things you can do?
Well, I mean, ask if they know if the company that they're working for is hiring.
Okay.
Like asking for advice is never a bad thing. And
Okay.
also like really just asking for the hookup. You
Yeah.
got it. This is about
Do this for me.
That's right. This is about relationship building, and a relationship is never about you. A relationship is always about the other person. And
Okay.
I think that's the biggest thing is like people are not far enough in the conversation to ask before they ask.
Yeah.
Like get deeper into the conversation, into the depths. I always say the gigs are gotten in the depths of the relationship. It's like an iceberg. Networking is the tip of the iceberg. The opportunities are in the depths at which you can converse with somebody, because that's what gets them to know, like, and trust you enough to put their name up for you. And so let's just say you're on a gig and you're in the conversation. You're not like, it's not like you're besties by the end of the day, but you also know that might be the last time you see them for a while or ever. You just never know. And you do want to connect with them. Don't be afraid to ask for the connection. Just say, hey man, are you on Instagram? Are you on Facebook? Are you on social?
Grab their email, maybe, if that's not their vibe or
that's
something.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. Like, I would love to stay connected with you, man. Email or something. Just like throw it at them. Just say, do you have social or email or something? I'd love to stay connected with you. That's it. That's the start or the stop of that conversation. Or if y'all have gotten so far in the conversation where you're talking about work and this person's giving you a little bit of advice about companies and stuff, you might be so far in the conversation where you could say, well, who do you know that I might be able to speak to at this company? As opposed to asking for the hookup, just say, who do you know that I might be able to speak to when I reach out to them?
Yeah.
Like you ain't asking for their blessing, you ain't asking for their hookup. What you're saying is, hey, I'm going to do this. Be cool if there was somebody that they might be obliged at that point, but you have to have some self-awareness of where you're at in the relationship timeline.
That makes sense. Yeah. I always articulate in my head is like, it shouldn't feel like you're asking for a favor.
Correct.
When you ask for anything, it should just feel like when I ask my friend to help me move, or when I do, they're doing something for me, but I know they're going to help me because they're my friend. It's just like an easy thing to do. It shouldn't feel like oh my goodness, big thing.
No, and when it happens, what happens is, because relationships, remember, are all about the other person. Mm-hmm. They have an opportunity to help you, and you have an opportunity to help them through being an awesome referral. But it's organically, it's like y'all both are just kind of sold on each other. Like, oh, this it makes sense.
Yeah, this is sick. Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah, it's like it works both ways. It's like, oh yeah, absolutely, that'd be so cool to be able to have you go and talk to them, and they're happy to do so. The reason why I got that opportunity that night in Backline was because that guy was just like, yeah, I'm this young guy. If I could see him going in there. And what ended up happening was I got a gig as the drum shop guy. There was a bunch of shows going out with Backline techs. There was a bunch of rentals, and the drum shop and really the prep shop, but the drum shop specifically was getting a mess. Stuff was coming in and going out. And
at Avalon?
At Avatar.
Avatar, excuse me.
Yeah, at Avatar. And so I came in there to solve another problem for that company, which was help them get that shop in order as the drum tech guy. I was literally going in there playing with drums all day, and they were paying me to do it. And that was like, I went from being a stagehand, a backline stagehand, to now I was doing backline. And by the way,
you're specializing, huh?
Now I'm starting to specialize. Now I went from being, and remember the who knows you is now everyone that went from knowing me as a stagehand, now I was showing up in the Avatar truck with the Avatar gear a little while into it, a few months into it, as the backline tech. Well, what ended up happening to bridge the gap to touring was Atlanta had this big rehearsal facility, and one of the bands, this R&B band named Van Hunt, was doing a rehearsal there. They rented Avatar gear. Avatar showed up with the tech, me, and I was there all week working the rehearsal with these guys. Well, they needed a backline tech. This was a van and trailer a bunch of dudes in a van and trailer doing clubs, and they needed an all around backline guy, really an all around guy. And I was working with them all week, and they thought I seemed cool. It's easier to hire somebody that you've been around, especially in touring, because skills don't always matter when it comes to hiring for a tour. The hang, everybody will tell you this. Oh, it's 80% of the hang and 20% of the work. There's something to that. And these guys at the rehearsal, they were like, "You were cool. Do you want to go on tour?" I had wanted to, but I had only started with this backline company like 3 months prior. And I was like, "Oh, I just kind of started with them." And at the time I was married to this lady, and I talked to her, and she goes, "Well, it was a Monday." And she goes, "Well, when does the tour leave?" And I was like, "Well, it leaves on Wednesday." For 6 months. It was a 6-month tour, no shows in Atlanta, and the tour was not even coming back to Georgia.
That's a long tour. It was a club tour?
It was clubs and
1 day on, 5 days off.
It was clubs and direct support for Seal. But the thing was, the reason why we were never coming back to Atlanta was the van and trailer tour. So once you start driving that distance and stuff, you ain't coming back. They're just going to put as many shows in between. You'll have days off out on tour, in hotel rooms and stuff, shared rooms, all the hard stuff. It's like $500 a week, $20 a day per diem, all like the hard stuff. And of course, at the same time, I say yes to the hard stuff because that's what you do, because it was the appropriate tour for where I was at. And
had growth, definitely had growth, man.
Had growth. I went back in there, told them yes. And from a Monday, I was at that company. By the way, I talked to the backline company, and here's how you handle that. Because that's how tour opportunities happen, by the way. They don't happen at like opportune times. They happen where it's like, "Hey, do you want to leave on a tour? Oh, by the way, you got to change everything about your current schedule and life that you thought you were doing.
I've been waiting for this. Get me on those 4 tires."
Dude, if you're waiting for it, then you'll be ready. But most of the time it's going to be like, "Okay, yes, I want to do it, but I've got to make a bunch of personal decisions first." But yeah, that's how I bridged the gap. Was I started to specialize. I specialized in backline, but I knew at that point, because I had learned everything in all the departments, which made me really valuable, because I was also able to stage manage. I was able to run crews because of it, because I was so well versed all around. But I knew that backline was my thing. And guys, if you're specializing in anything, there's levels to specialties. And so the cool thing is you can always grow no matter what. No matter what your choice is, you can always take it to another level. Always.
I think like the cool part about this is I think the cool part about starting as a stagehand is when you were going out on the road and specializing in something, you had such a big picture understanding of why people are in this venue, what they're doing. And it was probably so easy for you to just navigate the venue and feel right at home and not piss people off. And you're probably a great person to work with on all accounts, because they're like, "Oh, this dude's been here. He's seen what I'm doing. He knows what I'm doing all day," which is sick.
No, you're right, Adam. I mean, it certainly is helpful being, from that world. But I got to tell you, when I started, a lot of us started that way. A lot of us old schoolers, I should say.
You're like a young old schooler, though. You're like just on the cusp.
It's so funny. Dude, I was always the younger person on tour, and now I'm almost 40. And I thought, man, because my first tour I was just 19. I just turned 20 almost, 19 when I took my first tour. And so it was like I'd always been the young guy on tour until these days. But the cool thing is a lot of us started this way. But I got to tell you, if anybody, and I mean, we might get there in the conversation about how I'm helping these days with the next generation, but stagehands, like, it is paid school. Mm-hmm. It's paid training. The thing is like, you don't have to go the traditional routes in this industry. In fact, like Full Sail is not even an accredited university. Like not like you can get certain degrees and stuff like that, but they don't have accreditations that transfer, to my understanding, to like from their bachelor's to somebody else's master's and stuff. And it's because of the fact they're educating people about, just like school educates people. They educate people based upon the end results and some of the skill sets. The problem is the skills you learn progressively. You have no choice to learn most of the skills in this industry progressively. If you go and you learn things like lighting design and consoles and desks and stuff like that first, and then go and try to start in the industry, you're not going to start by operating those things. You're going to start
Yeah, that makes sense.
by the basics. Like that's just the hierarchy of the industry. And it always saddens me because I have people in my career coaching program that came from places like Full Sail that have been in the industry a long time. And it's like, yeah, they're 50, 70 grand in debt, and they had to go and start as stagehands anyways.
Yeah.
I remember Full Sail was teaching a stagehand program for like 12 or 15 grand years ago. They
That's
literally
wild.
had a stagehand program. I think it was like a year program.
And I think like so much that you have to learn is not actually what you're doing. It's seeing what everybody else is doing. It's seeing how people interact, how they hang. And you can kind of like, you can learn the skills as you go. The networking, you can't rush that. You just have to learn. You have to be there. You have to meet people. They have to meet you. And going to Full Sail, you articulate it really well. You're like you're learning the end goal before you do any of the groundwork. And you can't just come in and be like, I'm ready for the final boss. Yeah.
That's right. I mean, it's like we don't have tour residencies like they do in medical school where you spend 3 years working and doing the procedures before you actually go and consider yourself a doctor. We don't have that. And the thing is look, you can become a technician, an engineer, a designer, a carpenter. Like you can become all of these technical skills, these engineering skills that require all of these specialty understanding and application and capabilities. But the cool thing is you can create an incredible career out of this and not have to go to a formal school at all. The entry point to this is getting your hands on gear and doing events. It can look like stagehand work. It can look like church. It can look like the AV closet at a recreation department in your town doing shows at your little civic center or city theater. As long as you can get some experience to leverage, there's always a next level. There's always another level. So if you had church experience, running sound and lights and stuff like that at church and doing some events at church, you can then take that vernacular that you can speak and that understanding, that experience, and then reach out to a local production company that does it a little bit bigger and say, I have this type of church experience. I've done this. I speak some of the language, because that's it. Most of these companies and stuff, they don't want to have to necessarily teach you what the cables are called, how they connect, some of those things, how to operate on jobs and stuff like that. So if you go be a stagehand, you learn all of that stuff. You basically get trained to the point to where then you can go take your entry level stuff and enter into a specialty position at any and every single production company across the world. That's how it works.
That sounds like a perfect segue. So let's talk about, now that people know your path and kind of how you got into it, obviously it was 20 years ago. Some stuff might have changed a little bit, but let's talk about like the current day. What are people's entry points locally? So let's say, I'm Adam and I want to work, when people think stagehand, they probably think they work at a local venue, but what are literally, do they go to a venue? Do they email somebody? Do they find a company? Like, what is the very first step in getting hired as a stagehand?
The first step to get hired as a stagehand is to, first of all, if you know anyone in the event business, ask them if they know who the local stagehand company is. Okay. Go through your phone, your personal contacts. If you know anyone in the event business, ask them first, because the cool thing is a referral will automatically validate you. Even if it's a name that the other person on the other line don't necessarily know 100%, but they obviously know there's a connection there, it still will validate you. So,
box office at the local venue, somebody you've come into security at the local venue, like these people will know.
That's right. They'll know. And it might be a friend of yours. And then you can say, hey, Dave told me to reach out to you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, let's just assume you have no connections and no experience whatsoever. I love starting there. That's what I wrote my first book, Backstage Pass, about. No experience, no connections. Go to Google and literally type in this right here.
San Francisco.
Type in San Francisco local crew stagehands or San Francisco event production stagehands.
I was making a really bad joke because you said go to Google and Google's in San Francisco. So I'm just picturing somebody showing up at the office being like, I'm here, boys.
Well, they better have some results then if we're searching San Francisco. But this works in any market. I remember doing this as an example in one of my online courses where I took my students through this process. We looked up like Boise, Idaho, like some small market.
Yeah,
Okay.
an off day market.
It does not matter where you live. Okay. If there is ever a concert or an event in your area, there is crew. Okay. Your whole purpose is to get experience. So when you're first starting, you're wanting to get experience. And so you Google your city and event production crew, or your city and local crew, or your city and stagehands. Some of these things, the things that'll pop up are all the things that are relative. Now, understand who hires stagehands. Like we talked
Yeah.
about, it could be the venue, it could
Okay.
be a company. Now, sometimes production companies that actually provide lights and sounds and stuff like that, they'll internally hire. Okay. And then sometimes it's just a stagehand labor company. Now, if you're near any major city, you're going to get all of those people. All of those will come up as search results. But what you're going to start with is the stagehand companies. Now, you might be in a state that will force you into the union. I just want to say, if you're trying to get on tour and you're in a state that has to do union labor, don't worry about it. Just keep your tour goals in your sights and get some leverage. You're just there to get some experience. Because as soon as you can get any experience, you can then pull out of the union and go leverage that into the next level.
Just trying to learn, just trying to find, the next step and moving in the general trajectory.
That's right. So don't take me, not recommending union as don't go union. Well, I just want to stress that go growth. And if that is your next step into it. That's okay. Just continue to step forward as you're in the union. Don't be restricted up here in your head when it considers your growth.
And I was just going to say, I think your theme throughout all of this is, whether it be talking about working for free or working for a union, is everybody's different. Everybody lives in different areas. They got different things going on. It's
That's
just
right.
The reason that growth is just very unique to that person. So that's why there's really no right or wrong path. It's just where you headed. And I think that's great that you're saying that.
Yeah, that's right. And the cool thing about starting is you can only take starting level stuff when you're starting. Meaning you can only, get those stagehand gigs where you're getting to climb and you're getting to drive forklifts and pull cable and stuff. I can't do that stuff anymore. I don't do that stuff anymore.
Yeah.
I will never at this stage in my career go and take stuff like that anymore. So go and embrace those things now as what you're getting to do now as part of your journey. You don't have to do any of this, what we're recommending, by the way. But if you do, then choose things that's going to allow you to grow. So if that's union in your town, go join the union. The cool thing is when you Google this and the results pop up and you click through, every single website, whether it be a non-union company or a labor company, they will have a contact section. Most of the stagehand sites will tell you what is required for you to actually apply. All of the stagehand companies don't require any experience. They're just pretty much going to say, are you living and breathing? Are you legally right to work? Like seriously, man, guys, I got to tell you, we're in such a labor shortage right now that like at every level, everything is in demand. So whether you're trying to just get started or you're trying to make a big career shift forward, your next level is needing you right now.
So just get started. It sounds like is the thing. Just get in there, get foot in the door, boots on the ground, start meeting people, start letting people meet you.
Start doing the gigs, man. Start paying attention what the names of the cables are, what the names of the areas of the venues are. Start learning chain of command. I talk about this in Stagehand 101, one of my books, where I give chain of command and all of these things. But what I don't teach in my book, Stagehand 101, is a ton of the technical stuff. And the reason why is because it's not evergreen. The tech stuff always changes, but you need to be able to understand where it's at now. I talk about the things like how to act and operate on the job. As a stagehand, guys, when you get hired and you start to get hired by these local opportunities, there's going to be people that are not as enthusiastic, that are always focused on when they get to take a break next, when are they going to get to eat. They're always complaining about the trucks being late, complaining about how things need to be done and operated. They're going to be those people. If you are not one of those people, which you're going to be one of the few that are not, you're going to stand out. People are going to want you around. And so enthusiasm is one of the critical skills to develop. And it is a skill to be enthusiastic in a hot, muddy, nasty, rainy festival is hard to do. But if you can stay enthusiastic, even when it's hard like that as a stagehand, you're going to gain. And that's what it's required to the next level.
Yeah, that's the vibe on tour. I think we've talked about that a lot. It's like no one bad vibe person on the road, man, that ruins a whole tour sometimes. So you
It's
gotta,
poisonous.
it's yeah, that's a really good point. All right.
Yeah,
So people are
certainly
reaching out
poisonous.
locally.
Yeah.
What'd you say? Sorry?
No, just negativity is poison, man. I actually,
Oh yeah.
I always have a saying that says positivity loves company,
Yeah. That's a good
which is
vibe.
true. It's true.
All right. So people in theory reaching out, they find a way to get hired as a stagehand. They don't
Yeah.
exactly know what they're getting themselves into. They know they're going to learn a lot of things they haven't gone through,
Mhm.
experienced. Do you think you could kind of maybe set up on a very basic level? I know we've gone through your experience as a stagehand, but what can somebody expect after they get hired as a stagehand? Like what is their job? Like will they show up at a venue and they just do everything, or what is it?
Well, first of all, I'll tell you this, and this has become a very big problem these days, is never be late. I
Yeah.
was told when I first started, if you're late ever once, we're never going to call you again. And to be honest with you, I was never late. I've never been late ever. I did once. I was late, but I was still on the bus oversleeping. But that's another story.
I'm here. I'm at
But
the venue. Just some Z's.
well, first of all, I want to say, guys, if you reach out to these companies, these staging companies, the production companies, Live Nation might be the one that pops up search results for you. Your church, AV calls it. They all are going to hire you. And so
Yeah.
I don't care if it is your church or the AV calls it. If you commit to a gig and commit to something to these people, this is what you should do. This is how you should operate. First of all, be grateful when you show up. Like seriously, you don't have to, you're not privileged to do this. Like this is a very cool thing that you get to do.
Hmm.
So be grateful. That will come across to everyone around you. Be enthusiastic about the position. There's going to be a lot of people are just treating this like a job. Okay. They're doing that because other people are doing that. Like, don't jump on that train. Be enthusiastic and be grateful. Second of all, never be late, or should be first of all, but never be late. Okay. They're going to give you a call time. They're going to give you a call time and a start time. Call time's always 30 minutes before. That's when you should check in. And then it gives you time to smoke your last cigarette, make your last text, and then be ready to work. If they don't give you a call time and a start time, they only give you the time you're supposed to show up, then you show up 30 minutes early. Take it upon yourself. Always show up with blacks. Okay.
Yeah.
Always show up wearing black clothing. And if you're not wearing black clothing, then bring it in a backpack. Okay. So you can be up for any opportunity to stay as long as you can. Your whole mission is to be involved in the event from start to finish as much as you can. Right. So if you show up and then they say, hey, can you stay for show? And you don't have a black shirt, then you can't stay for show. Stagehands need to be indiscreet, so they wear black on stage. So always wear black. Be prepared with your few tools. Bring a pair of work gloves, like mechanics gloves for $10 from Walmart's fine. A crescent wrench, a C wrench. It's like a little adjustable wrench, a little C wrench. Bring a crescent wrench and a blade of some sort, box cutter, a pocket knife. So a blade to cut tape and stuff like that. Gloves that you can hook onto so you can push cases and load and unload and stuff like that. And then have a crescent wrench to use in the lighting section, in the lighting area. Most stagehands are failing to bring this stuff to their gigs. It's very frustrating. And so you can imagine the one stagehand that actually has everything, they always stand out.
Yeah.
They're
That's
always
awesome.
Always. These are easy stuff. Never
Yeah.
be on your phone. Don't be on your phone. Don't leave without telling the person that you're assigned to or your steward that you got to go take a leak or something. Like just wait. Go tell them. Tell the person. Make sure people know. Here's one real easy one. If you get somebody to assign you some work to be done, say someone says, hey, take these cables and plug them in. When you're done with that work, go back to that person that assigned you that work and say, I'm done. What else? I'm
Yeah.
done. What else? If they don't have anything else, just say, I'm here, right here, standing by until you need me. Don't leave your person until they send you away. These are just very key things. If you do these few things, and also always raise your hand when they need help with anything. Don't vet it. Just don't. And also, if they ever say, who can stay, who wants to leave and who wants to stay, always stay, right? Like always say yes to stuff. Always say yes to the hard stuff. Always stay and always be present, meaning don't use your phone. Don't leave without, don't be talking, chit-chatting when you're trying to focus, when you're trying to work. That's it. Notice I didn't say learn audio, learn lighting cables. Notice I didn't say learn how to build a screen. Notice I didn't say, right? Like that stuff you will learn
It'll
progressively
happen.
every gig. It'll happen.
Yeah, it comes along.
But come correct with those just few components. Bring that to the work, and you will be asked to do every gig. You will be the one that everyone wants to work with, and you will also be the one that every tech that you work with will be happy to share their knowledge with you.
Yeah, I like everything you're saying. Obviously, I mean, we're here, but it's just so nice to hear like all these things. We always say like, focus on the hang or don't worry about the technical stuff. And I think you articulate it so well on why it's important, because there's so many people that aren't even able to meet a bare minimum of being a good hang. And how can you tour and live with somebody if you're not able to hang out? I mean, and I've toured with people, I'm sure you have too, where their skills maybe aren't necessarily where they need to be. But if you're a good person, the result is never you get fired. The result is, all right, we're going to work. You're going to get better. Like you're going to grow with that artist, and you're going to stick around. You're going to be there for the long run. But if you come out and you're really good at your job, but you're an asshole to everyone, you're out. Like you're usually, hopefully.
Yeah.
So I love hearing about this on a local level.
Unfortunately, there is always people in our industry that are like that, the grumpy roadie, and there's reasons behind all of this is because it's become a job to them. There's all there's some sort of badge of honor that a lot of these people think that it is being like this. Yeah. But at the end of the day, man, if you're not getting better at it, that's the only thing that's going to get you moved out of the way, because listen, and this is cliche to say, but there's no traffic on the extra mile. Like there's always room for the best. Always. There's a bunch of noise at the bottom. There's a bunch of noise of average people. But like at the top echelons, like with what I've been doing in my career on tours and stuff, like I haven't ever had to call and ask for work for a gig, in, I don't know, a dozen years or so. It's like no resume stuff. It's stuff that's all referral based. I mean, even getting gigs like Bon Jovi, which was the gig that I was on before Jonas Brothers, and even Jonas Brothers. It's no resumes. It's all referral stuff. It's all just like, who knows you at the top levels, and that's what you want. Like you can have that same effect at every level, and the effect is consistency, the reliability, the predictability on how you're going to be on the job. Like when I was hired by the staging companies to do those 1, 2, 3, 4 person gigs, they knew how Kenny was going to come. They knew that I was going to treat the client with the utmost respect, that I was going to treat my fellow stagehands with the utmost respect. They knew that I was going to like never look for the break, never like just not come through for them. And so I was an easy shoe in. And the cool thing is, man, I've had things like this because of these character, the way I call it my who, right? Like I always say that doing this job and touring and stuff, the hardest thing is identity. It's what I do. It's not who I am. I and that's a big tough thing for people. That's where you get into post-tour depression and stuff. But the thing is the who you are is the stuff that I'm talking about now. It's the stuff that you carry with you from your stagehand days to now. That's who you are. It's your character. And there's been times I remember when I was working with a country singer, I was at the top of my game in Nashville, probably top paid that could be in Nashville as a guitar tech. I was working with this country singer, and I was also doing sub dates for an up and coming act. For me, if I would have taken full time with this up and coming act, it would have been a step back in pay, really a step back in level. However, there was a lot of value I could bring to them. They were on the rise. And even the country artist that I was with, he goes, Kenny, you should go help those people. Like I'm good. Like I'm in my legacy phase. I'm doing 100 dates a year. Like this is what it is. You should go and help these people grow, because you're going to grow as well. Like, and he goes, and you always have a gig with me anytime you want. You believe it? One boss is telling me, hey, look, I would love to have you and keep you, but they would find more value in you. I would only keep you comfortable. You see, even someone else, that's the right way to live. Even someone else recognizes your growth and your potential. So, you do this, you don't get to this point in your career where all of a sudden the doors and the relationships happen. No, you start there. You start being that person. Start dressing the part. Start talking the part. You want to be a touring person, look at the other stagehands. Most of them are timid. Most of them are. But then look at the touring people. Look at how they're operating, how they're talking, how they're approaching the work. Model them. You know, they're doing what you might want to do. Model them, and that's kind of what I
No,
did.
that's a great point.
I stepped into it.
Oh,
you know,
man.
I walked it before eventually the opportunities lined up progressively. You know.
Well, thank you for thank you for very thoroughly walking everybody through not only your path, but the path they can take and expect to take to become, working locally, because I think this is the encouragement and the information people really need. There's a lot of unknowns there, and that's by design in this industry. And it's nice to know them so that you know where you're headed, you know how to get there. With that being said, before we finish this up, I was wondering if you'd be so kind as to share maybe some advice for peers and what they can do to maybe help the next up and coming people, like what they can do to encourage those people who reach out and ask for help. I know that you have a coaching project that you do, and you've successfully helped 300 plus people get on the road. That's probably a little bit more involved than most people are able to do. But what can people do who are touring, who are in the industry, to help bring on these new people? Because like you said, we've got a shortage out there. We want to.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, I appreciate this question because it's obviously near and dear to me. I love helping facilitate people to this industry because this industry kind of gave me passion and purpose. And I always like to say that through my mentorship with my programs and my books and my coaching program, Crew Coach, I like to say I'm a purveyor of principles of passion and purpose. And I think that I think
good alliteration.
To my fellow road people, if they're even listening to this, have some grace. I think in this day and age, it's hard as a touring person because we have a crew shortage. Okay. And then on top of that, the crew that we have, none of them practically are trained. Even ones that are supposed to be top trained, like these union folks, they're not trained on the jobs. And so there's a lot of resistance on top of the crew shortage. And we touring people may show up to a venue down 6-10 hands, like seriously. And then on top of that, the hands where we're getting, they need help. And so I would say, and I know that most of you are probably stepping into the role of trainer, but what I would love to do is catch some of that and help you with some of the resources that I have, somewhere where you can literally point and there's free help because a lot of people aren't teachers, by the way. I naturally help on gigs. And I found that a lot of people, a lot of tech people and crew people, they're not necessarily trainers and they don't necessarily want to have to answer all the questions, not because they're ill-hearted. It's because in the heat of things, they don't necessarily have the patience or the capacity. Now, I'm quite different. I'm literally going, okay, yep, wrap the cable like this, like I'm that guy. But if you're not that person, just know that and you're listening to this and you're a touring person, have some grace, answer as best as you can, send them my direction. Okay. Send them the Backstage Crew Careers on Instagram because I give away everything. The cool thing about being a career coach is I don't even sell my courses and programs anymore. I push people to my coaching because the knowledge, I just told a ton of you how to do this. Knowledge is not power. Knowledge is only stored potential. It's the action that's the power. It's the getting out of your way and putting in the work. And so you road people, stop being afraid to mentor. Stop being afraid for your gig because you think that that there's some sort of gig loss or scarcity. One of the biggest resistance that I've had from veteran road people since I've been a teacher, I published my first book in 2015, but even before that, I've been teaching, is the scarcity mindset from a lot of road people that they're worried about someone coming in and taking their work. And if you're worried about that, maybe you should be worried, because if someone can come and take one of my courses or listen to this podcast and take my advice and actually come take my Jonas Brothers gig, then they deserve it. Like, come on, people. Just be a teacher.
Come at me,
just
boy.
Be a mentor. That's right. Come at me. But sincerely, don't worry about your work. You're never secure with a company or an artist anyway. You're only secure because you're good at what you do. And so, and the
Yeah.
relationships that you have knowing that. And so teach, just help these people. If you see somebody that has potential, push them in the direction to want to like, hey, did you know that you can actually make a great career out of this? If you see a stagehand that is a little bit more curious, feed it. Just feed it because we need them.
Yeah.
You're going to see that stagehand again, possibly.
Yeah.
So we need them. And there's enough for everyone, man. Like I could probably help 100 people a day get on tour, and there's still till the day I die, and there still will be more tours than available crew people.
Man. Well, that's good. I mean, it's good. It's good that we've got that availability. And I think the hard part is it takes a little bit to onboard, but this availability, like take advantage of that because it hasn't always been that way. It's a very sought after job. A lot of people want it. And you heard it from Kenny, jobs are open. They're ready for you. So just start locally and, move your way up. With that being said, I'm sure we could keep going. That hour flew by fast. I think we're even a little bit over, but hey, I have no qualms with that. That is fine. I will happily go on. But where can thank you so much for coming on, by the way. This is awesome. I love listening to you. I got notes for quotes. I learned a lot. So I really appreciate it. Where can people find you? And keep in mind, I will put all of these links in the captions. So you don't really need to spell it out. I got you on that. But if you just want to drop the things you are doing so that people can, further their learning.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, Backstage Crew Careers on Instagram is the newest Instagram where I'm collecting up people. That's kind of where I'm putting all of the career growth knowledge and stuff. You can also find me on Facebook for you Facebookers. It's /Kenny Barnwell. Crew Coach is our coaching program. It's currently closed for enrollment right now. But you can find the link for Crew Coach at the Instagram at Backstage Crew Careers. But yeah, just Backstage Crew Careers.
Do you know when that'll open up again? Like when will you
we're
do your next
open
one?
Crew Coach again, I believe in September. Well, actually, enrollment will be reopened in August. Right now, we have 50 people going through the program. We keep it small group coaching, and it'll be open back up. It's specifically coaching for touring crew. Whether you're aspiring to get on tour or you're currently on tour and you're just trying to figure out how to reconnect with the next level, that's who this is for. Yeah, that's right. Find that next level. It's always about the next step that we're doing with our career, by the way. And I think the next step for your listeners is to go follow us at Backstage Crew Careers on Instagram, or friend me or follow me at Facebook /Kenny Barnwell.
Well, we've got some great people, especially on our Discord and Patreon, that are very active and persistent with this. And I think this will definitely solve a few of their problems. Hey. I just gave you a follow. I got it. Backstage Career Education. Yes. I like this. This is great. Well done on initiating all these things, because I know how hard, and we talked prior to this, and how persistent you have to be to make stuff happen. And you've got a lot going on. You got a family and a career. That's like twice as many things as I've ever handled at once.
Adam. I mean, sincerely, man, 80 something episodes of this. It's like, what changed my career was awareness. And so one cool thing about what you're doing, Adam, and one thing that I really respect a ton is bringing awareness to this, because the awareness alone changed my life. And because you're bringing awareness to someone, you literally could change someone's life from doing this podcast. So I really appreciate what you're doing, man.
Thank you. Hey, man, I think that every time I ever do a talk or a speech, I'm going to call you up, because I think I just need you to intro me or just talk to me for 10 minutes before I do it, just so I can be like, I don't know what I'm doing, but that guy does. So just listen to him. Because I'm a little more mathy than him, but he's got this on.
Man, I appreciate you sincerely, and I'm so stoked to get to share this message. Continue to share this message, because it's so near and dear to me, man. We need you folks. We need people that are excited about the event business and touring, and the shows, cliche as it is, will always go on with or without you. But I'd rather just have you here.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much, Kenny. Have a good rest of your week, and I look forward to meeting you in real life. I know it'll happen.
Thanks, Adam. Take care.